All right, we are live. This is the Gators Online Recruiting Show, live edition. I am Keith Niebuhr of Gators Online, and I'm joined by Corey Bender, also of Gators Online. We thought, Florida's had 3 big official visit weekends. We've done some recruiting shows on YouTube. Let's do a live one. Let's just get people involved and, see how it goes. But, Corey, Florida's coming off of another consequential official visit weekend. They had a dozen kids in town, picked up 2 commitments on Sunday. So we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to break down those commitments. You've written about them. You kind of know what their fit would be at Florida on the field, maybe culture-wise too. You were up in Gainesville on Sunday. You interviewed all these young guys. Then we're going to tell you who might be next to commit. And it's always kind of a crapshoot because things happen out of the blue. But we'll give you an idea of the guys we think. And anybody that keeps up, Harrison, Lucas, some of the guys listening, we know you guys follow this closely. Sometimes you know stuff right when we do, maybe even before us, but we're going to try to get everybody caught up from the weekend and then a look ahead to who could be next. We will preview, just so you know, we will preview this coming weekend, which is maybe Florida's biggest official visit weekend later in the week. We'll have a separate show for that. So Corey, let's get going. First of all, we got 2 big commitments. All right. So Florida wasn't that long ago. They were outside the top 75 in recruiting, right? Outside the top 75, had 1 commitment, and it was quarterback Will Griffin. And now things are starting to go in Florida's direction. We knew that commitments were going to come. You weren't going to sit on one all year long, right?
Yeah.
But they started to come in bunches. And on Sunday, Florida got a couple big ones, starting with Chancellor Campbell, 3-star offensive lineman, offensive tackle from St. Petersburg, Lakewood. What can you tell us about Chancellor Campbell, Corey?
Yeah, big kid, man. 6'8", 295 pounds. A kid those are legit measurables. That's what he measured in at Florida in previous camps. That's what he measured in as well. And obviously a guy that passes the eye test, doesn't hold much bad weight. A guy who I think Florida's known for developing offensive linemen, taking guys who are in that 3-star mold, even though I think Campbell will probably be a 4-star by the end of the cycle. But this is typical Florida, a guy who I think they can take to the next level. Upside. I think that's the biggest thing with him. Prototypical left side of the line, left tackle, blind side guy. And, Florida got in on him early. They offered him last summer. They've hosted him more than any other school. Early on, it was Florida, Miami. Miami kind of faded in recent months, and then Georgia finished second. But Florida, they've always been the most consistent. They recruited him hard from the start, and they were also very pleased with his development. Even though he's a 3-star now, he's known as a developmental guy. He's a guy Florida's been very pleased with as far as growth in the last 5 to 6 months. So I think by the time his senior film comes out, I think he's one that could really kind of skyrocket up the rankings just based off potential, but also on the field as far as, him being a road grader, a guy that really kind of dominates the trenches. And obviously at Lakewood, they play a lot of good competition. I think, there's going to be a good opportunity to show good film later this year. Yeah. But, we put a pick in for him last year. I felt good about Florida from the start. And Ohio State, this is a kid Ohio State offered not too long ago as well, and he would have been the take for the Buckeyes. So not only did Florida want him, but Georgia and Ohio State, they all kind of saw, the long-term potential from this kid.
Yes, I think he said in his interview with you on Sunday that he measured in at 6'8.5", 306 pounds or 305 pounds in Gainesville over the weekend. He's got a long reach. Obviously, that's what you want at tackle. Those extra inches on the arm length matter, man. They just do.
Yeah. Not much bad weight at all.
No, not really.
The kid looks like a power forward in basketball. He's a big kid.
And I guess it was a couple summers ago, Blake Alderman of Gators and Online and I were sitting out in front of the football complex, and Billy Napier was heading home, and he came out and talked to us, and he said, I want to get bigger on the line of scrimmage. And I brought that up a few times, but that's really emblematic of them wanting to get bigger. This guy at 6'8.5", 305 pounds as a junior, senior in college is going to be 345 pounds. And he doesn't, like you said, Corey, he doesn't have much bad weight. So right now, Florida's got 2 offensive line commits. I think 6 total commitments. Correct? Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Yep.
6 total commits. I'm going to check real quick here. I think 6 commitments. 2 of them, 6 commitments. 2 of them are offensive linemen. They're both 3-star guys. The other is Janari Carr, an offensive guard / center from Bradenton IMG Academy. He's actually from Ocala, but he plays at IMG. And Chancellor Campbell's a 3-star tackle. So you got a 3-star tackle, 3-star inside guy, Corey. But Florida had these guys higher on their board than you would think for 3-star guys. Did they not?
Absolutely. I think Florida obviously sees the long-term potential in these kids, and even Janari Carr, a guy that really doesn't hold much bad weight, a real road grader, a real good athlete in the trenches too. And I think they're definitely two guys who will probably outplay their ranking long-term. And I think even senior year, I mean, Janari Carr at IMG, the spotlight's always on them. He'll have plenty of opportunities to really boost up the rankings. And obviously the same thing with Chancellor Campbell. And I know Florida's been one school that's always big about their evaluations. They don't really care about the stars and all that. And it kind of proves with the Jake Slars in the world guys that they can develop, and they're known for that. So I think right now, like you said, Keith, they were guys near the very top of their board at interior and at tackle. And I know from those in the building, they're definitely pleased getting those two on board.
The way the offensive line has been constructed at Florida almost entirely, and they got a couple transfers, but mostly through high school recruiting. So right now, when you look at Florida's offensive line, you probably are going to lose your left tackle after this season. Well, you're going to Austin Barber. All right, so Fletcher Westfall, who signed in the 2024 class and redshirted last year, is now the heir apparent at left tackle. Right tackle, now Bryce Lovett is supposedly the leader to take over that position, and he'll have most likely a few seasons too. So you don't necessarily have to look. I want 5 stars just like everybody else does, but you don't necessarily have to build that way. The way Florida is built is really, quite frankly, with mid to high 3 stars and a few low 4 stars, and they got good bodies, they got good frames, they got good high football IQs, and Rob Sale and John DeCoster, the co-offensive line coaches of Florida, have then thus developed these guys. And now you're seeing people say, Cole Kubelik of ESPN Pro Football Focus, I think somebody else as well, saying Florida may have a top 5 offensive line. So they're doing it their way. It can be a little frustrating, obviously, as a fan, because you want to see these big name guys. I get it. Everybody does. But they're doing it their way. They're trusting their evaluations. They're trusting their developmental skills. Corey, one more commitment on Sunday. This was a really good one and an interesting one because Florida was not one of the first schools to offer Gainesville-Buchholz 4-star receiver Justin Williams. But the minute they offered, they immediately became a factor, and he ended up committing to the Gators on Sunday. And let's set the stage, Corey. Put us there in a nutshell. Put us at the moment where you interviewed Justin Williams coming out of the football complex, because I want people listening, and I'm going on and on. Yes, I know everybody. I'm sorry. I want people to know just how much this commitment meant to him and his family.
No, absolutely. So when he came out, first time meeting Justin Williams, the kid was all smiles, just a great kid. And, we probably asked him 2 questions about the visit, and he was obviously smiling from ear to ear. And then we asked him what was the best part of the visit. And he said, today overall, I actually just committed. And behind him was his mother and I believe his brother. And they were both in tears. They were both hugging each other, just kind of taking the moment. And you could tell as a family, this meant so much to them. And, obviously with Florida just being up the road, being the hometown school, they obviously had the offer on the table. But, coming out of the building, knowing that he was a Gator, it really, like you said, Keith, it really had emotions flowing from everyone in the family. And you could tell, when we're talking to Justin, he was just he couldn't stop smiling. You could tell this means a lot to him. And, you want kids in the program that know what it means to be a Florida Gator. He's been around the program his whole life. Mentioned how his mom just has to drive 15 minutes up the road to watch him play. Say he's excited to see his family and friends in the stands when he does, put on that uniform. But when we interviewed him, I couldn't stop looking behind him because, like you said, you could just see the whole family huddling up, and you don't see that often. You and I have been covering recruiting for a long time, and people get excited during commitments, but you could tell this one really, really meant a lot to the family.
Historically, I wouldn't say the Gainesville area where I grew up mainly. It's been okay in producing talent. Not great. Some good ones here or there, no question about it. Some good ones that got away too. But this guy put up some stats last year at Buchholz, my alma mater, so I'm especially proud of him. Helping Buchholz get to the, I believe, state semifinals again. He had over 1,000 yards receiving and over 1,000 yards rushing in the same season. By need, he had to play both positions, and you just don't see that all the time. He's 5'11", he's 190 pounds. He is a gamer. This is a guy that in one of the playoff games, I think the game that they lost, had well over 200 yards of total offense. At On3, we have him as the number 18 receiver in the country. And Corey, it wasn't that long ago. It was in February, March when you and I saw him at an Under Armour camp in Orlando. And I'm going to take a little credit here. He walked by and I hollered at him. We didn't have a photo. We didn't have a photo of the kid in the database. Nobody did. And I said, we need a photo of this guy, not knowing that Florida would offer him. Quite frankly, I thought maybe they wouldn't, but they hadn't yet, and they did. Quickly became a factor. They got him. Corey, what kind of player is Justin Williams?
Yeah, he's a do-it-all guy. I think playmaker, athlete, those are two words that really describe him. A guy that, when he spoke to Florida, they kind of compare him to Vernell Brown, Eugene Wilson, kind of a gadget guy that you can put in the slot, put him in motion, give him handoffs, jet sweeps, stuff in that regard. So he's a guy, I think you can call him a do-it-all type of guy where you can just do a lot, have a lot of different ways to get the ball in his hands. But like you said, Keith, over 1,000 yards rushing and receiving the same season. Regardless of who you play or not, and Buchholz plays against good competition. That's you don't see that often, almost really ever. As you can see, guys will have over 1,000 yards rushing or maybe 1,000 receiving by itself. But yeah, and I think too, Keith, like you said, they offer him a little bit later. And I think with Florida's belief, they probably didn't have to rush with him. It's a pretty deep wide receiver board overall throughout this whole cycle. And they thought maybe they can kind of see where they were at with other guys. And like I said, it didn't push Florida out of the picture. They offered, and some people thought, well, Florida State, some other schools offered before Florida. But that hometown appeal, like I said, the kid didn't take it in a bad way. He earned the offer. He's camped there several times. And then Florida jumping into the mix a little bit later than other schools didn't matter. But I think it's another guy, Keith, that, as his senior film comes around and, there's going to be more buzz around him with him being a Florida Gators commit. It wouldn't shock me if he even climbs more in those rankings because he's a good size too, a good frame to him as well.
He's a good player. And I remember I absolutely was the person that sent his film to Charles Power of On3 and Cody Belair of On3. They are the leaders of our rankings team. I said, take a look at this guy. Same with Corey. We don't push rankings upon people because we realize since we cover Florida, the Gators and a lot of the kids in the state of Florida, it needs to be an impartial process. So yes, we'd like all the Florida kids to be rated higher than everybody else, but we also want the ratings to be truly reflective of what guys can do and are as prospects. But Corey, before we continue, I need to push one thing here real quick, and that is this. Let me find it. It's not an ad. Don't worry, everybody. But be sure to like and subscribe. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button down below. We appreciate all the comments. We appreciate everybody stopping by. We're 12 minutes in. We're going to go about 30 minutes. Look, man, if these things go well, we'll try to do more. I know I say that all the time, and then life changes and we get busy and we've all got other things we have to do work related. But also make sure you check out gatorsonline.com for more. This is the free stuff. The good stuff is on the site. In fact, the people that our subscribers to our site can tell you that we covered the hell out of the last weekend with all kinds of insight from Friday afternoon all the way to Sunday night. Huge official visitor weekend. And now's the perfect time to join because we're going to do it again this weekend where there's going to be over 20 guys most likely in Gainesville. Corey, Justin Williams is Florida's first receiver commit. And like we mentioned, Florida's got 2 offensive linemen committed. How do you think Florida's doing at those positions right now?
I think pretty good, Keith. Obviously, like we mentioned before, Campbell and Janari Carr, those are 2 guys that are high on Florida's wish list. I know Florida wants to sign 5 this cycle as far as along the offensive line. And I think overall you get 2 of your top targets, and they're both not the same position. You get 1 really good interior guy. You get 1 offensive tackle, and we're not even, through the month of June. And I think obviously there's other guys that Florida can really get on board. Obviously you have Felix Ojo, you have some of the big names that Florida would love to land, but there are a good amount of 4-star guys and high 3-star guys that Florida has high on their board that they can definitely still get. And I think overall, when you look at receiver too, we're going to touch on some of these other guys too, but just to kind of mention them, Samorian Wingo's a guy, Brian Williams. It's a deep wide receiver board. Marcus Daniel out of Alabama. And then, obviously this past weekend, you had a huge guy on campus, 5-star wide receiver, Sadaria Morgan. And that's just some of the guys at receiver. So I think overall, this was a big weekend, a big last 2 weekends, really. You get some of your key guys, and now you can start to be a little bit more selective with who you want. But both positions, they still have over a handful of guys on those big boards left that they can get.
Okay. It was a big weekend. Like we said, a dozen guys in town. Yes, Taylor says Corey's bringing the heat, always is. I just talk in circles. I don't know how to get myself out of it. But Corey.
So, Taylor Holland, that's the fan. He actually lives in my hometown. So
that doesn't count then.
Yeah. So shout out to Taylor.
So Corey, you do a stock watch after the visits. You go into the visit and you say, here's the guys I think most likely to commit to least likely to commit. And then you do it again after the visit.
Yep.
Kind of tells everybody, hey, here's how I think things went. Overall, how do you think the weekend went? Just in a nutshell, just kind of, it seemed, I wasn't up there this weekend. You were. It seems like things went really well for Florida. Now there's always the visit high. I get that. Yeah. Seems like they hit some home runs here.
No, 100%, Keith. And I think obviously there's other guys in the list who I expect to be in the class at some point. And then you have guys like Jake Cruel. Again, his father graduated from Florida. He isn't planning to decide till October, but I think Florida made a really big move with him. KJ Ford, a prospect out of Texas, another highly regarded edge. I mean, I know people in the building in Florida feel as if they might be leading after this visit. And you have guys like Lincoln Watkins, a high 3-star tight end who named Florida as his leader. And we'll touch more on Samorian Wingo. And obviously, we have a few tight ends we can talk about too, who I think Florida has a great shot at landing as we go on the show, who could be next to commit. But when you put it all in the nutshell, man, when I was doing my insider, it was hard. Almost every guy I felt like I was writing about, Florida was almost trending as the front runner. So, a lot of these kids, it was only the second official visit weekend. It was May and June. A lot of these kids still have other trips to take. But Florida really set the groundwork for a lot of guys. And, once July hits, when a lot of these kids are announcing, it wouldn't be surprising if Florida ends up being the choice for several of them.
Okay. Good stuff, Corey. All right. So now we are going to get into who could be next to commit. That's really what people want to know. I mean, the minute we do a commitment story, they read the first sentence, they see who committed, and then they're like, all right, you losers, tell us who the next to commit's going to be. So give me some names. Give us, because I got to write these down too. You're doing all the work right now. So who are some guys that could be next to join that commitment list for Florida?
I mean, we'll start Jarrell McCoy. I mean, obviously, because we all put in picks for him today. He'll be returning to campus this weekend. He was initially scheduled to officially visit Texas. Obviously, that's a big name, one of Florida's top overall targets on defense.
Tell us about him.
Yeah, no, he's a guy 6'6", about 250 pounds, a wiry type of guy. I think a guy could be a stand-up guy, or he could play outside linebacker. I know defensive line coach Gerald Chapman and outside linebackers coach Mike Pearson are both involved with them almost on a daily basis. So that shows his versatility. A guy that I think overall, when you look at a frame as far as SEC, this is a guy who could be 6'6", 280 pounds by the time his college career is over with. Top 3 of Florida, Texas, and LSU. But like I know at the top of this, we all put in picks in for him today just because he canceled that OV to Texas. He was a former LSU commit. We don't see him ending back up in their class. And, based off what we're hearing, we think this weekend or maybe even possibly sooner, he could pop for Florida. And obviously that'd be a major commitment for Florida. I think another one, Keith, we can mention is Kiku Ama, a tight end at IMG Academy, a native of Hawaii, who we've been high on for quite some time. I know I put in a pick back in April for him. I know tight ends coach Russ Callaway, co-offensive coordinator. It's a guy he's very, very high on. More of a blocking tight end at this stage, but a guy that definitely has a good upside as a pass catcher, a good athlete. About 6'6", 255 pounds, another big body along the trenches. So I think right now, I think those are the two most likely guys as of right now who could be the next commitment. I know right now it's looking really good for Amala, the tight end. Like I said, I've been favoring Florida for a while, and based off our intel from yesterday, Florida feels very, very good. And we'll see what happens. He has trips lined up to Washington and BYU coming up, but it wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't end up taking those trips. So those are two. I think right now those are the two main guys we're keeping close tabs on.
One other guy we wanted to mention, you mentioned him already, but we wanted to go into more detail. Samorian Wingo, the 4-star receiver from St. Augustine. He's visited Florida, a half a dozen times, was back in Gainesville over the weekend. One weekend after going to Miami, and quite frankly, Corey, Miami felt like they knocked it out of the park as well down in wherever they do their official visits, South Beach or wherever. They thought that would be great, okay? And it probably did. And he's been down to Miami. And he's admitted those are the two schools standing out. We think it's going to come down to one of those two. There seems to be some confidence at both schools. But you and I both know, and Blake Alderman as well, the Gators Online, that Florida has some real confidence coming out of this past weekend. They think that he fits on the field in the scheme. He's well over 6 feet tall. He's also a standout basketball player, scores 16 points a game, super athletic dude at the receiver position. And they also think he's a strong culture fit, that this is a good – they just feel like his personality and the type of human that he is fits in well with what they want in Gainesville. Look, you got 85 scholarship guys. There's going to be an arrest here or there, but overall, you want a certain type of kid. They think he fits that. Corey, you have already put in an on-3. When we say RPM pick, any people that don't know, I always get on Corey. He doesn't explain these things. Corey can tell you he's probably sick of hearing. No, but I'm joking, Corey. But RPM means recruiting prediction machine picks. In other words, whatever. But Corey, you got in a pick for this guy pretty early. You've got some pretty good intel on this one. What's your gut telling you?
Yeah, I'm still thinking Florida, Keith. I mean, wide receivers coach Billy Gonzalez, I'll remember this too. When he went on the road in January, Wingo was the first wide receiver he went to go see on the road. And I talked to Wingo about it at that time. He said, hey, I'm not really too surprised because our relationship is that strong. And Wingo, he attended almost every Florida game last year. And even when the 2025 class was in the spotlight, they still were speaking to this kid all the time, several times a week. And that kind of stuck with me. And, Miami got an official visit first, and then Florida this past weekend. And Keith, you noted as well from intel you were hearing that Florida felt they probably had a little bit of advantage over Miami. I'm still hearing the same thing. And I spoke to someone today that, right now it sounds like Florida might be recruiting them a little bit harder than Miami too, just because of some other receivers on the Hurricanes board that they think they might be able to get, including another kid that's committed elsewhere that Miami could potentially flip. So for what I'm hearing Florida's making a little bit stronger of a push than Miami right now. He doesn't plan on deciding until later into the summer. But as of right now, I definitely feel good about Florida's chances. And they've probably been the most consistent. Miami was buzzing in the spring, got a 3-day visit. I think that's where it really started heating up for Miami. I think he was there for 1 day and said, hey, let's make it a 3-day visit. And that was noteworthy. But I think overall, Florida getting the OV after Miami, being more fresh in his mind, I think that's a factor. And I'm giving the Gators a slight edge as of today.
All right, a couple guys, Corey, that people are going to want to wonder about. 5-star Sedarian Morgan, receiver out of Benjamin Russell High School in Alexander City.
Yep.
I want to say that's like almost halfway between Auburn and Birmingham. But look, most people think that's Bama. It's going to be Bama. He's got that Bama official visit coming up, I think, in a couple of weeks, I want to say. But he said after the visit to Florida over the weekend that they had made a big move. You buying it or not buying it, or maybe buying it a little? What's your gut telling you on Sedarian Morgan, the 5-star receiver?
Yeah, no, I think right now, Keith, he said number 1 or number 2 on his list, but I think, like you said, Alabama coming up and Auburn, both of those schools are receiving official visits ahead of an early July commitment. My thing is, can Florida maintain that momentum? I think that's going to be difficult. And I asked him straight up, I said, hey, there's been a lot of buzz around Alabama. I know people have said that's your family's favorite school. He said, yeah, to a degree, but it's also kind of half split with Auburn too. And he said a little bit of Georgia, a little bit of Florida. So I know he loves the people inside Florida's building. They had a really detailed plan for him this weekend from, hey, when you get here in January, all the way through the end of the season. Wide receivers coach Billy Gonzalez really kind of laid out the blueprint, and, that really impressed his camp. Right now, Florida's in his top 2, but I think, Keith, in my opinion, I had him a little bit farther down when I re-ranked the official visitors from most to least likely. Some people were surprised by that, but it's really, like you said, I think Alabama's going to be difficult to beat out. And just the in-state school, Florida got an OV. They knocked out of the park, but it's going to be difficult to keep the momentum with a few more OVs. And he even said he's going to take another visit to Miami, too, and squeeze that in. I don't think the Hurricanes are really looked at as a major contender, but you just never can really count them out.
Well, yeah, and the reason is, we talk about relationships and all that stuff, but let's be honest, NIL is a huge factor
100%.
with most of these kids, with some more than others. Some of them, the reason why we don't bring it up, and they don't bring it up, is because the NIL situations, even at most of their contenders, and then it does then come back down to relationships and things in that nature. But
I will add that too. We asked them, and I asked Sedarian too. I was like, how important is NIL? And a lot of these kids will say, hey, it's important, but it's not everything. And he said everyone right now is kind of in the same ballpark. But he also said, hey, man, I'm not too worried about it right now, because he said if I perform, those numbers are only going to increase over time when I'm in college. So it's important, but it's not, he said, the number 1 factor.
All right, Brody Jennings, Michigan commit, a lot of eyes on him. First of all, we want to give our condolences to Brody and his family. His father, who played at FSU, passed away a couple weeks ago unexpectedly at the age of 47. So we know Brody's going through a lot. You've dealt with him a lot, Corey. He seems like a good dude.
Yeah.
So we're thinking of him and his family. He plays at Jacksonville Mandarin, and to his credit, he's actually gone on official visits the last couple weekends. I want to say Miami last weekend, and then Florida this past weekend, or the previous weekend, and Florida this past weekend. Michigan cornerback commit again. Former teammates at Mandarin with Florida quarterback Tramel Jones, Florida safety Hilton Drake Stubbs. We're told by people in his camp that it went really well. There's some real optimism. Of course, one of the people that told me that is just an eternal optimist, so I don't know how to gauge that, but really good 4-star cornerback. There's so much interest in Brody being a Michigan commit. What's your latest intel, Corey?
Yeah, I know, like you said, Keith, I know confidence in Gainesville is pretty high coming out of this visit. And I know, if I'm not mistaken, he has a sister that attends Miami too. I think Miami made a big move with him last weekend before coming to Florida. I think Florida, I mean, you and I have written about him quite a bit, Keith, and Florida has been positioned as a school behind Michigan with the best shot at flipping him. But I think right now Miami's kind of right up there too. You can't count out the Hurricanes after the official visit. But like you said, Keith, the connections with Hilton Stubbs, Tramel Jones. Another big thing too is the relationship with Billy Napier, because when Will Harris left to go to Miami, many people thought maybe Florida's going to take a dip, as far as where Florida stands with him. But Billy Napier really picked up the slack while Deron Wilson was coming in. And then since then, Deron Wilson has done a great job of connecting with them too. So, Florida feels good about where it stands, but I think it's going to be more of a long game. I know Brody's been happy with Michigan. He always says the right things about that commitment, but I think also games this fall are going to be key. And I think the good thing for Florida is the proximity, from Jacksonville to Gainesville. He'll be able to get to games quite a bit. You can plan those games the morning of, because it's not that far of a drive, where when you go up to Michigan, you take your OV and you have to get flight plans and stuff in that regard. So I think overall Florida, I still think they're the team probably best positioned to flip him, but I think it's going to take some time to really kind of bring him off that commitment if they do.
Yeah, I think you're a bigger believer in visits than I am these days with this. I'm like, yeah. It's take one visit and all of a sudden so I don't know what to think anymore.
It's tough. I think Miami is definitely a bigger threat than they were, though.
So interesting battle there. Miami secondary coach Will Harris,
yep.
and then Florida's secondary coach who coaches cornerback Deron Wilson. So, the old Florida coach versus the new Florida coach, and interesting. All right, that'll wrap up that part. Corey, let's see. We looked at the commitments. We talked about who could be next to commit. We recapped the weekend as well, but let's see if there's any comments. We've got a bunch of people checked in here, and I'm gonna run a lot of these by you. Okay, so hang tight. All right, Jeremy, I have to also, before I put them up, make sure people aren't cussing and all that stuff. So Jake Cruel, you wrote about him over the weekend, or I know you interviewed him. 4-star edge from IMG Academy, originally from Orlando, listed at 6'3". Is that accurate? I think he's probably closer to 6'2". I don't know that it matters. I used to see this guy at camps, Corey, and I would think, oh, he's maybe a camp warrior because he hadn't filled out yet. Then you watch his film. Corey, you've seen his film. Is he legit? He looks legit.
Oh, yeah, explosive. I mean, he fills up the stat sheet. Like you said before, Keith, camp warrior, his motor's off the charts. I mean, he's one of the most – I think he's one of the best edges in this class. I mean, I think when he's at Bishop Moore, his stats were gaudy. Now he's at IMG. He's filled out even more, lower body and upper body, so he's a big kid. Really good character kid, a really good character as well, very driven. So I think when you put all that together, I think it's a kid who could take this game really far and play for a long time. I think right now, he's probably closer, like you said, to keep the 6'2". 6'1", almost in 3'4", 6'2". I don't think he's 6'3", but I would say to people, you play with the cleats on, and then with cleats on, you probably are around 6'3". So I don't think that matters, though, because I know like years ago, you'd want these big edge players, but as you see now, there's a lot of guys like Jonathan Grenard, the former Gator for the Vikings. He's not the tallest edge guy, and he's one of the best in the league. So that's not as popular as it was before. You want guys with that good height, but I don't think that's going to matter with him.
Yeah, he's a ball player. I think he's got a pretty good reach too. If I get a hold of his stats, I will post them on the site at GatorsOnline.com. All right, we got some comments we want to get in there. King Shad, he's loyal. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Nobody more loyal than this guy, Lucas. Although sometimes I see him praising other sites too. I don't know if I can always trust. No, I'm kidding, Lucas. We love you, man. All right, let's see what else we got here. Gator Gang for life. What's up, guys? Harrison's always popping in. Let's see if there's any more questions. There's a lot of comments telling us how wonderful we are, but that's not always. All right, here we go. Your buddy Taylor says, seems like a Jalen Woods do-over. Billy was very high on last night. I wonder who we're talking about Draylen McCoy, maybe. He might be talking about Draylen McCoy. I'm not sure. What do you think?
I'm not too sure.
Yeah, let me.
I wish I could help you out there, Taylor. I'm not too sure.
All right, let's see here. Okay, can you tell us what the new recruit Williams 100-meter time is? I don't have that. I actually don't have that. I had the other Williams 100-meter time.
Yeah.
Let me get that. I'm friends with his coach, and I will make sure we post that on the site. So thank you. All right, here we go. I think we got another question here. Taylor says, with a few cycles under his belt, is it far-fetched to expect on a yearly basis we will get more 3-star O-lineman potential? Yeah, I mean, look, you take what you can get. I mean, I think Florida's profile is rising where maybe whereas they used to take guys that were a little bit down the board because they were missing on other guys. I mean, Ja'Nari Carr is a guy that was way up their board. That was a priority recruit. Chancellor Campbell was a guy that was way up their board at tackle. Now, I will say this, and Corey would probably agree, it's not a great offensive tackle class nationwide. Yeah. And so, maybe if it was a great class, I don't know if Chancellor Campbell is as high up the board. Maybe he is. I don't know. I'm not quite sure where they had him.
Kine Pepe was one guy they loved, the IMG, but he shut it down. But, Campbell is not far behind him on that list, though. I mean, like you said, Keith, very slim-o tackle board.
You're not expecting your tackles unless it's a Cyrus Quandro. You're not expecting your tackle to start right away anyway. So I don't think development and potential is necessarily a bad thing. So, all right, last question here. Jeremy says, anything on KJ Ford? That's Kevin Ford, the 4-star edge from Texas. Corey, this is an interesting one because there's been chatter about Bama. There's been chatter about USC. And is Texas A&M the other one? Okay.
That's the other one, yep.
But Bama's got look, give those guys credit. They got a crowded edge board. So we're not sure where he is on the board. He could be high, could be middle high. USC, same thing. And Florida's done it at the same time. I don't want to say he's falling into Florida's lap, but different staffs have different priorities for guys. And they're doing a hell of a job with this guy too. They went from nobody was even talking about them a few weeks ago. Corey, we got to give Blake credit. Blake was on this one pretty early. What do you think? You talked to him.
I think overall, optimism in Gainesville is pretty high. I spoke to someone, close to this recruitment on Sunday, and they thought Florida could be potentially leading after this visit. And, outside the football facility, Joe Hamilton, outside, one of the recruiting staffers, outside linebacker coach Mike Peterson, they were all at the car when KJ was about to leave, and they were dabbing it up and having a good time, a lot of smiles before he left. So obviously he's a priority guy for them. He visited for the first time last year for the UCF game, visit earlier this year, and now this official visit. And he's had a board, as far as the schools he's looking at, that's kind of changed around quite a bit over the last 6 months. But Florida was always a school he would always tell me, like, hey, I'm going to take an official visit, and then a date when he gets set. And then it finally came through, and it's like, okay, I guess Florida is a little bit more serious about him. And then after this weekend, we definitely can say that he's near the top of that edge board, along with like Trent Henderson, Jake Krull, which when we talk about the edge board for a while, there's a lot of talent that Florida's looking at. But I think right now with KJ Ford, many people have thought, like you said, Keith, Alabama, Texas A&M, USC, Florida, those are the 4 main schools. It's been kind of hard kind of seeing who's above who in that list, but I know right now Florida is very confident, and I think I don't believe he has a set commitment date, but I know right now you got to look at Florida as potentially the leader.
All right, Corey, make sure everybody listening hit the like and subscribe button if you like it and you want to see more of it. Right now, Florida's got 6 commitments, the number 25 recruiting class in the country. Obviously not where fans want it to be, expected to be. But this is they're getting a reputation as sort of being, I don't want to say a slow starting staff, but their classes are classes that have come together slowly. And we saw this last year where they flipped an ungodly amount of guys, like 12 guys in the last couple of months, to put together that really strong class. And this looks like it's going to be a strong class too. So 6 commitments, 3 of them are 4 stars. The 4 stars are wide receiver Justin Williams, safety Caden Hall out of Milton, Florida, and 4-star quarterback Will Griffin. The 3 stars, offensive tackle Chancellor Campbell, interior offensive lineman Ja'Nari Carr, and then defensive lineman Jameer Perez, who is visiting Ohio State, I believe, right now. Something to keep track of.
Yep.
I don't know what's going to happen there. I do feel like Florida's going to be fine on the defensive line recruiting in this cycle, though. I think that's going to be maybe the one single area where we see the biggest uptick. All right, Corey, I think that is probably about it. Actually, we got one more question from Parker, and then I'm just going to get one more question from Parker. I know he's a wild card, but any chance 5-star linebacker Isaiah Williams ends up back in the class? He's been committed to Syracuse, FSU, who else? Louisville,
then Florida, FSU, then 5.
And now Ole Miss. So he's on commitment number 5. Supposed to be in Gainesville this weekend. Is that going to happen? Is Florida have any chance at all, Corey, with Isaiah Williams?
I think they have a chance. I know it's a guy Florida still likes. I was told they're obviously evaluating him from like a character standpoint. And as of right now, his official visit is on. There was chatter from what I was told about a week or 2 ago that potentially Texas could replace Florida on this OV list. But I don't think anyone can say with confidence they know where this kid's going to sign. This will be one of those recruitments that will go down in memory. I think you've talked to him in person too, Keith. He's a great kid.
Yeah.
He doesn't come off as some kid who's all over the place and wants attention. He's actually a very quiet kid. I think he just obviously gets impressed very easily when he goes on these visits. And, I think it's just been a wild card thing. But I think Florida, they're still pursuing him. And that was a school he loved growing up. And I know as of right now that he's still on the Gators board. It's a guy they like.
All right. Okay. Corey, just your general thoughts on where Recruited is headed right now. Do you feel like the class is coming together in a good way?
No, I think so. I mean, this is the time of year we've all been, you and I and Blake have been talking about this. It was a slow start, but this is when the dominoes start to fall. A lot of these kids, when you're a school like Florida, you're in the mix for a lot of these top kids. And when a lot of these top kids, they want to take several visits, compare them, and then make a commitment. And that's why you have so many kids deciding at the end of June and early July. So that's just where we're at. And obviously over the last couple of weeks, you saw this class kind of grow. Now we're at 6. And I think we can have another commitment or two before the end of this week. So I think right now, I mean, you have to be – it's what we expected. It was a slow start, but every summer you always see the recruiting class start to build up. And I think after this past weekend, and then like you said, Keith, over 20 kids coming in this weekend, I think this class is going to start building up fairly quickly. And a lot of them are big-name guys. So you got to be seeing too. I think when we hit August, I think most fans should be probably pleased with where the class sits. Well,
before we wrap up, I just want to tell Corey, thank you for sitting out in the hot sun in front of the Florida football complex all day yesterday.
Always a good time.
And I'll be there this weekend. So it's always fun trying to find out figure out where to go to the restroom after you've had 4 Pepsis and 3 bottles of water. But Corey, great job as usual. We appreciate it. Parker, Taylor, Lucas, King Shad, everybody for stopping by. We love you guys. Make sure you go to GatorsOnline.com. We got a busy week ahead. There's going to be a ton of recruiting stories, recruiting intel, all that stuff going into next weekend. So thank you so much. Take care. We'll do it again soon. And again, Blake and I will have a preview show for this coming weekend later this week, probably Wednesday or Thursday. So thank you so much and take care, everybody.